Why hello and welcome back to another episode of Voice of the Rings. I am your host and guide, Zollin Ironshield, and today we are going to be reviewing The Guardian and the new updates. We're going to go in depth over their skills, their trait tree. That's the goal of this video right now. I'm going to try to do it in a way that is quick and not take too long, but we are going to cover it very thoroughly. And also, this is after the big update to Guardians in patch update 37, okay? So just throwing that out there. I usually label my videos, my newer guide videos, the year, so you kind of know when, but this is after the update. So what I mean by that is we've had a big overhaul update to the Guardian class. Really awesome. Actually, really awesome updates. So at first I was a little bit worried about the idea of making the secondary, the fighter of Shadow a secondary tree, okay? I'm gonna have to walk, some of the people are using that, so I'm gonna go over here while we talk. All right, that's okay. Lots of people making new characters, having fun. I love it. That's how it's supposed to be in this game. So the fighter of Shadow is now a secondary backup tree to either the Defender of the Free or the Keen Blade. Really, though, they didn't really... It's pretty much overall a buff. Okay, I was a little worried then doing that at first. I was kind of hoping there'd just be 3 trees, but now that I've looked at it and studied it for you for this video, it's really cool, okay? So there's some really neat things just to whet your appetite. For one, Guardians now can block with a two-handed without a shield in the Defenders of the Free, Fighter of the Shadow tree, which is really, you are able to block with a two-handed weapon. Normally, you can only have a one-handed weapon and a shield, and that's the only time you can block in this game. We have block, parry, and evade, right, in this game, and all classes cannot block if they don't have a shield equipped. Well, now Guardians can block with a two-handed, which I think is a really cool addition to the Guardian to make them kind of tanky, but where they can DPS. They've really amped up their ability to dish out DPS. It's much more fluid. There's a lot more skills. They're faster, so there's much more viability of having a Guardian being, like, actually able to keep up with another class in DPS, all right, if you're traded right and have the right gear, which is really exciting, okay? Really exciting. The next thing is really cool and awesome about this is, again, I was a little worried about that, but now what we have is we almost have more options. I was thinking if they made the yellow tree a secondary tree, it'd be less options, but it's really more options, okay? Because now you can use the yellow tree with either of them and only have to put in 1 point per thing in the yellow tree because it's one of the secondaries. So normally how it works is it's 2 points into whatever tree you trait into, right? If you watch my trait videos, you can watch that for more details. And then if you put points in any of the other trees, it's 2, right? Instead of 1, because it's not the tree you're traded into. Well, now the Fighter of the Shadow will always just be 1, no matter which red or blue tree you're traded into, since it's a helping tree, which means it gives you more options to add a lot more points that you have into stuff, right? And fill out that yellow tree too, as well as your red one or your blue one. I think this is really cool. I think it actually gives more versatility because you can kind of mix and match, that's the word I'm looking for, with certain things. So I think this is going to be super duper cool. Let's go over it right now today, my friends. And again, there's also another cool thing, just to whet your appetite one more time. Protection by the Sword is a buff that I think comes from the yellow tree. We'll go over it right now I read it a minute ago, but boost your damage to your fellowship, enables you to react or to an attack, block, or parry response by an ally within 10 meters. It's an AoE, you guys. If you parry or block an attack, you are able to, on a melee skill range skill hit, receive 20% of reflected light damage. I think you reflect some damage back at the enemy. We'll look in that more detail in a minute, but it's just a toggle on and off. You don't have to click someone, and it's just in a little circle around you. So as long as you're with your buddies in PvP, fighting with like champions and stuff, if they get parry responses, or you're fighting with the tank next to you, and he gets a block response, you're gonna get it. You don't have multiple people, right? So it's a benefit if you're close to people. It's not a benefit though if you're farther away. But if you go back to straight into the blue tree, you have your regular protection skill that I believe. Let's see. Fellowship and raid members near the Guardian receive less damage. Oh, that's cool. I actually get reduction now with it. It's super cool. Your allies improve their defenses, incoming healing. So it doesn't even look like it gives responses now, but what it does is it kind of like gives a buff to your people within 10 meters. So they're making Guardians like more relevant, okay? So Guardians have always been kind of one of the basic classes, I guess you'd say, like starting, like easier to learn, I would say, than other classes if you're comparing to like, you know, the Warden or the Bjorning or the just for a newer player to this game, right? They're obviously get more complex once you get good at the class, and I wouldn't ever say any class is like super easy. Like, but at the same time, there's a couple that are harder, right? But they've really made the Guardian more complex a little bit, and I'm happy about it because I wanted it, and to be able to do more damage. It's just, oh, I can't even tell you how excited I am right now as a Guardian made for literally the beginning of this game. All right, so let's go through it. We're going to start with showing you the animations of the abilities in the 2 trees. We got some more new players here having fun, probably with the River Hobbits. Those have just gotten released too. The new race. Oh, look, that looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Little side note there. It's a pretty cool looking character there. All right, so they're doing the quest right now. Let me show you. So since I've been a long time player, I will show you the newer looking abilities, okay? So we have, everything else is about the same. We have Guardian's Ward, right? We'll go through the skills real quick. We have Sting, Improved Sting, which gives you the parry response, you can just, basically it removes corruptions, right? You have Vexing Blow, which creates a lot of threat. It's an AoE in front of you, all right? We have Sweeping Cut, and I'll have some timestamps to certain areas. So this is going to be running through all the skills. Sweeping Cut, it's a big 2-hit AoE in front of you. Stomp, it interrupts someone. It's your kick. You have Regular Shield Blow if you're in shield, which causes a shield hit. And by the way, it modifies some skill stuff. Successfully block response may now be played. All right, so you also then Shield Swipe, which is this is the same as it always was. And then you can do Shield Taunt or Shield Bash. And then after one of those, it opens Shield Smash. Big AoE in front of you, 9 targets, okay? So again, you can kind of just go through and use these. If you're tanking, boom, 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 your shields, okay? Then we also have, I'm gonna walk back here so we have a little less loudness happening there. We also have, of course, Retaliation. It's the same, requires a parry response. And yes, Force Open is now in the yellow tree, mind you. I'm trying to remember, it always was. I think it was in the red tree before is how they moved it. So it's kind of nice, even if you're tank mode, you can use Force Open, which causes parry response to activate, all right? So you can do this, and then you can now use Retaliation and Whirling Retaliation, just like you could before, into Smashing Stab, which was a thing before, and also Redirection, okay? And what are these 2 things, all right? So let me talk you through those. So again, Regular Shield Blow, you get a damage reduction thing. That's from something we'll read inside the traits in a minute, but it's basically Shield Bash, causes threat. Shield Swipe causes lots of threat, 2-hit, right? Not too hard to figure out. Shield Taunt hits up to 9 targets at 10 meters range. Again, I'm gonna do this a little faster than my previous reviewing classes videos because I think they were just a little too long, so I want to make it nice for you guys as the viewers. When I rewatched it later, I was like, yeah, I could have gone a little faster. Then we have Shield, and then also Shield Bash. It requires the use of Shield Swipe, the previous one. They both will say that. It'll always tell you what it requires, right? So they're orders. So the fun thing about Guardians is they have these like rhythmic orders when they and the responses, right? Parry responses, block responses. That's kind of their thing. I think they're an honestly very cool class in general. Of course, I know you're like, well, Zollin, you've always been a Guardian. I'm like, I don't know. I think all the classes are really cool in LOTRO though. And then that will open up. And this Bash also is an interrupt. It will interrupt an induction. You all know what inductions are. It's something that's being channeled. It's usually that little glowy red-orange base around of a unit that you stop, okay? And it increases your threat. It's a threat generator. You're a tank. You're generating aggro or threat, which again, if you're a newer player to the game, that just means you're like, hey, your feet smell, and they attack you instead of your friends, okay? So you're generating threat, right? Okay? Shield Smash then is the one you can use. It's a big AoE, causes threat. It also is a stun, a 3-second stun, and interrupts inductions. And then there's some bonus reduction to critical defense rating for you. That's something we'll talk about once we get into the other page. Now, we still have War Chant. This is the same as it was before. Mind you, this is after the stat crunch, so numbers are going to be more realistic and not quite as extremely crazy as it was before. So I think that was a good idea, especially pre the big expansion that will be several months after this video. But this will be a relevant video for a while because there's a big update to the Guardians. I doubt they'll be doing any more to them for a while. War Chant hits up to 10 targets. Looks like this. It's an AoE around you. It does light damage. It greatly increases threat and -5 second block parry response skill cooldowns. That's kind of cool, but that's something that also that's going to probably be in the traits later. That's a secondary thing that's added onto the skill. So that's a pretty cool one. And then here is one of the new ones. It's so cool, okay, you guys. Cataclysmic Shot. This comes out of the bottom of the yellow tree of the Fighter of Shadow tree. This one is an AoE. It is a roar. It deals damage and stuns and surrounding enemies. You can see all the things it does there. It's kind of crazy, so we'll quickly run through it here. Applies Guardian debuffs and some bleeds to affected targets. It does light damage. On application, negative 37.5% target run speed. It changes probably depending on what traits I have traded. So it slows them all. It does duration. It reduces the debuff crit thing reduces their critical defense rating for that certain until out of combat. And then for 10 seconds, 30% makes them attack 30% slower, all the units you hit. For 15 seconds, every 1 second, plus 7.5 miss chance expires out of combat, 10 seconds. Wow, so that's a 10-second duration as well. Makes them all maybe miss more, makes them all do less damage. It just keeps going, okay? So you can read this yourself, but a lot of these are from the trait, from the ability, and from the trade tree. And it says duration 14.5 seconds, duration 1 second. Every 1 second, deal a certain amount of Bellinar damage every 2 seconds for 14 seconds, and something for every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Wow. So lots of stuff happening there. It's a 3-minute cooldown, but here's what it looks like. You ready? Looks freaking awesome. It's just like, roar, just a Brukazon giant roar, dude. I love it. It's so cool. And you can see now, it applied all of my bleeds. So those things it may be saying, all those bleeds it's talking about down there, may be talking about my bleeds from, it put thrust on there and stuff, but thrust is in the red tree. So interestingly enough, it added the thrust bleed, even though I'm not traded into the red tree. Interesting little side note there. All right, so now we're going to talk about, again, the parry responses. We already talked about them. Retaliation is an ability you can use after you get a parry response. Again, I said that twice. Parry responses are something that their reactions that Guardians can take to parries, blocks, okay? They can react and do stuff with those things, and you got to just keep that in mind for this class in general. Again, Force Open is just a slicing ability that gives you a parry response automatically without parrying, which means then I can use my spin retaliation or my single target. It just depends on which one you want to use. Usually, you probably want to use Whirling Retaliation. It's an AoE, 7 targets. But Relentless is a little faster. It's a little jab. So Whirling Retaliation takes a little bit more animation and time to do. And also, it's a longer cool. I mean, they're both 5 seconds. So if you're going between, one of them might be on cooldown if you're doing fast responses, okay? When you're fighting quickly. Smashing Stab after using Shield Swipe or Retaliation. So you can only smash the enemy with a Shield Blow and Weapon Strike. If shield damage, if after Shield Swipe, damage and stun. If after Retaliation, damage and bleed. If after both, damage and open and Fellowship Maneuver. Okay? So interestingly enough, it depends on what you've stacked. So if we do this into Retaliation, into this, now this one, now that would open a Fellowship Maneuver. So if you notice, it's stacking certain things on my stats, so you need to use what it says. It tells you that. Again, if after that, it does a stun. After Shield Swipe, it does a stun. Excuse me, Shield Swipe is this one, okay? And it's not Shield Taunt, Shield Swipe. But if you use Retaliation and Shield Swipe and then use that, it will do a Fellowship Maneuver, which is a much harder core stun, where you really can't get out of it. And, mind you, I really would love to see them update the Fellowship Maneuvers. Now that the stats have been crunched, I'm sure the Fellowship Maneuvers are a little bit better, but they're probably still not as good from the level 50, but side note. Who knows? Maybe after saying this, it'll be an update. You can watch one of my guide videos later. Now we have Redirect. This is after using a Retaliation or Whirlwind. It says right there, or Whirling Breach. Mind you, Whirling Breach is in the red tree now. That's a new skill. We'll talk about that. Or, I mean, it's a different version of Whirling Retaliation. It's in the red tree. It just replaces the skill. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's go through this slow, or I'm going to confuse you. So this one does, on any damage, negates 15% damage, reflects 15% damage. So that's kind of cool. it gives you a little thing for 10 seconds, basically, where you're reflecting some damage back at them and also taking less, which is cool. So that 50% you would have taken more damage is going to them, the enemy, for 10 seconds. So that's kind of a cool thing. Strike enemy, reflect a portion of their damage back at them. All right, and then we have Stagger, the good old Stagger. It's not any different. You'll see this when we go into the red tree too. In fact, why don't we just save it for the red tree right now? We'll skip it for now. Turn the tables, okay? Now this is very interesting. You can now cast Turn the Tables on people without being stunned. But it does a very similar thing. When you are dazed, stunned, or knocked down, recover from an impairing effect and inflict them upon your enemies. All right? So, another interesting thing about this, it's not single target anymore, you guys. It's an AoE now. So, they're making Guardians much more relevant at taking lots of ads. Very, very cool. So, basically, you pop out and roar. If you get stunned, you can use it, or you can just use it anywhere. And you notice it's like a little spin now. It's got a new animation. I love it. It looks really clean. It looks really good. I'm very excited, you guys. You can tell in my voice. I'm pretty excited. My main class got really awesome buffs. Not only to better tanking and being more relevant, also doing more damage and dual wielding will be more maybe respected now for Guardians, right? I always thought they were fine at it before, but now they'll be really, really, really good at it. So anyway, cool. It's a very fast cooldown, mind you. It used to be like several minutes at 31 seconds now. It's reduced by, I think, a trait. We'll talk about it in a minute. But that's super cool. So you could use it just as a stun. I'm not sure if the stun... I think the stun will go off no matter what. And there we go. Oh, and look at that. You are also combat status. You're immune. Combat status immune. Oh, cool. All right. Well, yeah, huge update there to Turn the Tables. I always loved that skill, but now you could just swing around. Now, granted, if you're in PvP's Entomors, they have to be close enough to you, but 6.2 range is pretty far. All right, Litany of Defiance, okay? This is the blue version, so this is the version from the blue tree. Cry out, it hits 6 targets, surrounding enemies, slowing their attacks, cashes out all fortification effects. That's another one. Double your mitigations for a short period of time, while also intercepting 10% of the Fellowship's damage for each stack removed, okay? Greatly increased threats. And the fortification, yeah. All right, so, sorry, I'm going to confuse you guys. So it's a pretty short cooldown, but it's just another roar. And basically, it's just helping Guardians be even better tanks and tanking ads and helping their team. They're going to be much more viable again as like one of the main tanks in the game, right? Because for a long time, there's been other classes that have kind of like almost gone past them as being main tanks, which is not how it should be. Guardians should be like the main tank. That's kind of their thing. So now we have like 2 or 3 classes that can be like really good tanks. Now we got Fray the Edge. Taunt the enemy into lowering its defenses, increasing... I'm pretty sure this is still increasing the chance of a Fellowship Maneuver. Fellowship Maneuver chance increases with each use. Cool, so it like stacks over time. Duration, I believe this is still a Force Taunt. It is, there it is. It says it right there, Force Taunt for 5 seconds. And then Fray the Edge, and it looks like it lasts 15 seconds. Can I cast it again before the... I can. So you just have to make sure you keep an eye on it while you're using it, and you have to keep stacking it, okay? Cool. That's a new update to that, by the way. A little bit different image, too. They updated the color in the background. They made it look like an actual taunt, which I like. Then we have Challenge. It now hits 12 targets, and I think it might be even more depending on what I have traded in the tree, but we'll look at the trait tree in a minute. We're talking about the skills. It's 14-meter range. Draws enemies' threat away from your allies. So this is one of the bread and butter abilities, which is now a 30-second cooldown. So they have lowered all of Guardian's cooldowns, if you've noticed, which is awesome. It makes the Guardians even more viable for being amazing tanks. So AoE mass thing. We've got our charge ability, same as ever. 10 seconds, 50% movement speed, 1 minute cooldown. Wasn't it 5 minutes? No, it was 1 minute. We got Let Fly. It's our little 1 range ability. Guardians don't need much more than that. That's not our job. And then we have Engage, draws enemy threat. This is also, I think it's a Force Taunt. making the target's most threatening opponent. And it slows their movement speed by 37.5%. Okay, so yes, it is also a challenge. So we have lots and lots of taunts now, which is great. We also have Bastion of Light, which I believe changes in the red tree possibly, but we'll look later. Your connection to the light manifests beneath your feet, making your targets within the light susceptible to your debuffs. Create a 6-meter hotspot beneath your feet. Enemies that are marked by the Bastion of Light become susceptible to spreading debuffs. So this is there's a thing we'll talk about once we own the trait tree. Oh, that's kind of a neat little animation. It's got like little pretty sparkles. Look how sparkly it is. So anyway, pretty cool. This is kind of new. They've redone some of the other... They've kind of changed a few skills that really were not very great. This isn't exactly how these skills and these icons used to work, but it's a better. They did it's a good update. We have Shield Wall. Protect an ally, intercept all incoming damage. It's the same as it's always been. They have not changed it from what I've seen reading it. They still target cannot evade, parry, or block. Transfers all the damage from the target to the caster and negates armor damage. So yeah. So you don't take armor damage, but you still absorb full damage. But it's still a cool thing to have around. I think Shield Wall is really cool. Protection by the shield. Okay, Fellowship and raid members. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, right? Now basically it's just an aura around you, and incoming damage, tactical damage, and healing modifiers, range damage. They're all increased, and that's for everyone around you. It's a buff for your Fellowship. So that's super cool. It's just a toggle on off. It's kind of like having your own special stance, but for your whole group as a guardian. So you're like protecting all of them. I think that's super cool. Again, makes them much more viable than they were before, right? And I still think guardians were plenty viable, but now they're going to be like good. We have Thrill of Danger. Regenerate power increases with every enemy near you, up to 5. The skill works only in combat. For each enemy, gain some mana back, and also on hit restores. It's a thing we'll talk about in the tree in a minute. When you cast it, okay, when we're in combat, we cast it. When we're hitting this thing now, every time we hit, we gain some HP back, okay? So that's part of its new effect. We didn't do that before. Very cool. Ignore the pain, same as before. Removes up to a bunch of dots or poison or whatever is on you. You can just kind of roar it off. It's only a 5-second cooldown. I think it was that before. Guardian's Pledge is still kind of the same. I think they might have reduced the cooldown. I'm trying to remember. No, I think it was already 3 minutes. Looks about the same. 15 seconds, you get 20% increased parry, blade, evade, and a block. I still think that could have been bumped up personally myself. I think it could be a little stronger or have a slightly faster cooldown. That's just my opinion. And then Warrior's Heart. Increase your maximum health by 45% for 20 seconds. Restores 80% of your maximum health. Applies a bubble of 81,000, which I'm going to tell you right now is an insane number. And you also take 20% reduced incoming damage for 15 seconds, which I don't remember it used to do that. So it's really that's really powerful still, considering the changes with the stat numbers. So that's huge. That's a huge awesomeness, and it's only a 2-minute cooldown. So that's really good. And then we have Juggernaut, which is a really cool ability they added when they first, when we first got the new trait tree a long time ago with Guardians. So this isn't really new, but sets your block chance to 100% and expires if you're out of combat for 9 seconds, but it lasts for 15 seconds on every harmful skill targeted at you. On parry, block, partial block, or block, you do common damage back to the enemy. So not only are you literally blocking pretty much everything that can be blocked, which is most everything, except for some AoE abilities. You're freaking like reflecting the damage at them, so it's really cool. And you are immune to all combat states, which means being stunned and things like that, I believe, off the top of my head. 3-minute cooldown. Did they buff the cooldown? They might have, but here's what it looks like. So that basically makes you, you are very, very hard to kill. And there's all the numbers up here at the top. But yeah, anyway, very cool. So there are those, and then that's a dwarf race ability. We're not going to look at that. So now I'm not going to go over everything again that we already went over. We already went over a lot of this. We're just going to go over the things in the red tree that I did not show you, okay? All right, we'll get our axe out here. Okay. And that really cool looking axe. What do you think? Yeah, it's got like a water effect on it. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so now in the red tree, We have the protection by the sword. I can now activate this. Again, it's a toggle ability, but this is the one we talked about right at the beginning of the video that allows your character boost the damage of your fellowship, enables you to react to an attack, block, or parry by an ally within 10 meters. You enhance your allies and improve their melee damage. So, aura affects fellowship members within 20 meters, it says. If you parry block, I get their reactions. And then on melee skill, range skill hit, receive 20% chance to reflect a certain amount of light damage back on the enemies. So that's kind of cool. So I believe that means saying if they're hit, there's a 20% chance to reflect some light damage back at the enemy, which I bet you, just a guess, probably gives that aggro to you, that light damage, because it's helping you keep aggro. That's just an idea. Effects applied to the fellowship within 10 meters. They all get a 3% damage bonus. That's a lot. 3%? That's a lot. 3% increase on like a few, 50,000. That's a lot of damage, extra damage. Wow. All right, so here we go. Let's go ahead and do some hitting here. So now Catch Your Breath should have been on my other tab. I don't know why it wasn't on my tank tab. It should be there too. But Catch Your Breath, whenever you're able to catch your breath, you should use this all the time. It's a pretty fast cooldown, 44 seconds there from the traits I'm using right now. You are able to, with a block or parry response, again, there it is, you heal between 9 to 10,000 morale and restore 10% of your max power. Okay? So it just looks like that. You just take a little breather there. Okay? So now we talked about that one. Let's talk about these. So Retaliation is still here, but you have to get a parry response to use it, obviously. So, but here's some new things, okay? So Whirling Breach, okay, is pretty cool. Actually, you know what? Retaliation might be replaced with Breach. Why it's not activating when I hit this in Red Tree. Ah, yeah, you know what? I think that's what it is. I think actually Breach is supposed to be a replacement of Retaliation in the two-handed tree now. I think that's what it is. So I'm going to put that there temporarily just to figure that out in a minute. So anyway, Breach now is something you could just use without any skill that based on a 6-level parry response may now be played. All right. So again, if that's the case, then this should be able to be used. And since it's not, I think it's supposed to be a replacement to this one. So I'm just going to remove Retaliation off my DPS one there. A little side note for you guys. So that one's kind of cool though, because you don't actually have to parry. You can just use it. It says opens a combat response when you use it. So when you use it, then you can use redirect, which is the same thing we talked about in the previous one. So I'm not going to talk about that skill again. But then in order, you can use thrust, which is a bleed, right? And then it opens to the king, all right, which is one of my favorite skills on the Guardian. And then same thing with Whirling Retaliation, which is an AoE damage that does a lot of damage that you could just use, and it opens them up, those three. And then you can also use Overwhelm, Thrust, or Redirect. So I'm gonna use Overwhelm, and then I'm gonna use To the King, and you can just kind of rotate through that, right? That's kind of like, that's the point of this combo here, okay? You can kind of rotate through them. I have videos teaching you how to use these combos. So your new abilities, basically Breach has been added where they don't actually need to have any responses. You could just use them whenever, which is great when you're being a DPSer. You don't have to wait and start with force open, right? That's kind of the idea, I think, behind why they did that. But still, pretty cool. And then To the King. So let's talk through a few of these real quick. Thrust then. Whirling Retaliation, just an AoE like the other Retaliation. Breach is like the other one, just a stab of damage and opens up a response. Thrust deals some damage and does a bleed, okay, over time. Overwhelm is a very hard hitting skill. It does a lot of damage. You see its max number there. It can hit up to 40,000, where Thrust can only do 15. So it's a much harder hit. It deals powerful damage that will also increase a deep wound into a terrible wound, okay? So again, this leaves a deep wound, Thrust. So what you can do is you do this into Thrust, into a Whirling Retaliation, into Overwhelm, and that turns it into deep wounds. And now that does a lot more. So that's the combo into a To the King. Well, now To the King is really good, and they've done some updates to it. So applies on a critical and devastating critical, so critical hit, you 3-second knockdown, which is much more powerful than the stun. It's like between a stun and a Fellowship Maneuver, a knockdown. It's kind of similar to a Fellowship Maneuver. It's a very hard stun to get out of. Does a lot of damage, and also increases your melee damage by 10% for 15 seconds also makes you attack 20% faster. So To the King's awesome. Again, high DPS. Stagger, same thing. I said I'd save it for this one. We're talking about it now. Stagger is where it takes it reduces their movement speed for 24 seconds by 30 something. You can read it right there, 37%. And their attack duration, so they attack slower, okay? You have to hit them in the back to trigger that, or if you crit them, it will trigger that same effect. It's a 5-second cooldown. It does a lot of damage. It's a good ability. Just smack, right? And there, it triggered it because I crit. Okay, so there's the debuffs up there. Then we also have, again, Force Open. Gets a parry response, right? So, and really all it does for our DPS tree now, because of the update, is pretty much allow us to use Catch a Breath. Okay? Because, and again, these three down here are kind of useless to even have here. I might take them out because I'm not using a shield if I'm using a two-handed, right? My shield things down there that would also need a block or parry response, right? But again, so pretty much it just opens the ability to use Catch a Breath when you're in DPS form. Brutal Assault uses, you just hammer down. It does a bleed over time. The trait will give your attacks a chance to cause a bleed if you trade it. Yeah, but anyway, it looks cool. It's like a magical hammer comes out of the sky with whatever weapon you're using. Fun one to use. And then we have just a good damaging one. We have Hammer Down, okay? A devastating blow that inflicts increased critical damage, so if you crit, it does a lot more damage, and will stun weakened opponents. 3-second stun when the opponent are at low morale, okay? And it says it right there. It's under 50% health, basically. 3-second stun, and it does 2 different attacks, and if it crits, it does a lot, okay? Yeah, look, wow. Wait, did I just do 861,000 damage with that hit? That was a lot for the stat change. I'm gonna check. No, not 800,000. It was 86,100. That's still a really huge hit. Wow. For considering all things considered that we just had a stat change when I'm making this video. We lowered all the stats across the board, including the NPCs, so they're not astronomically out of the world, right? So yeah, good ability. Now, Brutal Charge is different than regular charge. It gives you 60% movement speed and 10% increased melee damage for 21 seconds. The first attack you do against someone will knock something down or stun them for 5 seconds, automatically crit on your first attack as well. So if I trigger this, that means when I hit this, it would stun it if it wasn't a dummy. And it would also always crit. Look at that. Boom, boom. Both hits crit, because it's the same ability, mind you. There's 2 hits in Brutal, in Hammer Down. Pretty cool. All right, so the last ones we haven't talked about that are in this, my fighting one here. We talked about Thrill of Danger, Engage, Relentless Fury. Okay, this is a new one to make Guardians more valuable and damage roll. It's so exciting for me. The Fervor and Fray, challenging your martial skills and prowess into deadly attacks and accessing your complete arsenal of skills for a short time. It says 20% increased melee damage and 20% increased crit melee damage for 20 seconds, okay? Any skill that are based on a successful parry response may now be played, so it automatically opens all your parry and block responses. Any skill that are based on a successful block, same thing. It's a 2-minute cooldown, and it lasts for 20 seconds, which means so every 2 minutes, you can add 20 seconds, so every minute and 40 seconds, pretty much. You can have 20% increase melee damage and crit. So now let's try something. Let's do the actual ability, which is also a similar animation to that other new one, which is cool. And then we're going to use the Brutal to make sure we get a crit, and let's see how much more we crit with Hammer Down. All right, so now let's see that 20% increase. Okay, remember it was 81,000, right, before? 81,000. That one crit for 114. That's about 20% increase. So that's pretty cool, right? And then, of course, we already talked about this one, the Cataclysmic Shout. But it does this. It does like the damage and rock, and immediately, by the way, applies all your bleeds. Which I forgot to say, Sweeping Cut when you're in the PV, when you're in two-handed Red Tree, gets a bleed added to it as well. That's important to add for that. So wow, we covered the skills pretty extensively there. Good job, team. Granted, there's a few other things. Guardians also get the ability to make an acorn, right? And send an acorn to someone to summon them. It's kind of a unique thing for Guardians, like summon your friend to help you, right? Let's see here. Yeah, so we can go through. Hold on. Let's see. Oh, I wonder if, did we get that ability removed? That would be kind of a bummer if it got removed. But now I have to check. Nope, it's there. Guardian's Promise. Whew. I was like, that would be a weird thing to remove. Guardian's Promise again is an acorn you can make and send to someone. Bolster of Light does a similar thing as it did before. Makes them more susceptible. You kind of put it on the ground. It adds the pretty little sparkles, and now they have a much higher chance of getting your debuffs, your bleeds, all that kind of stuff if they're in it. And they also can take some light damage. Okay, so now that we covered that, wow. It takes a really long time to cover these classes, guys. I'm trying to go as quick as I can here. But if you're now here in the video and you jump to this timestamp, we are now going to go over the trait tree. All right? We'll do it as quickly as possible. So let's start with the tank tree, because I feel like it's a good one to start with. So, as you know, with every trait tree in LOTRO, you can go watch my video on traits if you want details. We're going to just cover the skills, okay? As you go down the left side, it gives you certain things as you put points in, right? So let's go down the left side first of what you get for being traded into the Defender of the Free, okay? So this first one gives you some armor, critical defense, some generic stats, okay? Adapt it. So I'm going to hover it with the mouse over there. It's going to pop up right here, okay? I cannot make this bigger. I'm sorry on the screen. It's as big as I can make it for you guys. This makes you incoming damage from all sources 1% less. Okay, just little buffs. 1% is 1% though. That's a big later. Protection by the shield. So this gives you your ability to protect people, the AoE ability, right? Missing the incorrect weapon. Oh, interesting. So you cannot have a two-handed weapon to use that. So you actually have to have your one-handed and your shield. Oh, so you really do have to have a shield for Litany of Defense and for protected by the shield, which makes sense. And of course, shield wall. But so then we also have Challenge of the Darkness, +3 challenge targets. So when you're in blue line, that means you're going to be able to AoE and hit more things with challenge, this ability, which is why it's 12, right? Where the other ones are 9, which is also very high. So yeah, it's Guardians have been buffed major in that way. That's really awesome. Strengthen the Bulwark. Your fortification buff will provide additional damage mitigations per stack. All right. Your critical hits with shield skills will also automatically apply a stack of fortification. So fortification is a stacking buff, which I will have to show you guys in a second, which that other one was talking about. Blocking attacks will restore a small amount of morale. Cool. So every time you block, you heal a little bit. That's pretty cool. Shield the people. 25% chance for skills to apply a fortification buff. Your shield skills are twice as lucky to provide it. Okay, so now let's look at this. Relentless attack. All right, the sting skill has a chance to provide a block and parry response and some finesse. Okay, remember we talked about that? Remember, so again, the only reason it has that extra information below it here is because of this in the tree. And I'm going to say that a few more times when we go over this, okay? Tireless Defender. Guardian's Ward will reduce skill power cost by 30% while active. So, again, you can see it's that thing. So it always adds this, but it also adds that bottom part because of that. All right. Guardian's Pledge. That just gives you Guardian's Pledge. You should always have that if you're tanking. It'd be crazy to not take that. Bellow. Reduces the cooldowns of challenge, increases the range of challenge, and fray the edge. All right, 100% increased range and 25% seconds reduced cooldown. Awesome. Guardian's Ward just gives you tactical mitigations. I don't have that on right now. Turn the tables, negative 30 seconds on turn the tables cooldown, 20 combat state immunity duration, which again I believe means you are immune to stuns and other things, such things, maybe like silences. I don't exactly remember the exact thing. You guys remember the exact one? I think it means stuns, but I just haven't seen that in a long time. This one gives you Shield Bash. We already know what Shield Bash does. We talked about it. This one gets followed through. Shield will affect 7 targets. You have to put in points to get it up to that many. Additional 7 targets. Stabbing, we already talked about the skill. This makes it easier. We already talked about the skills because now I can just kind of show you what's what. Shield Wall, well, it gives you Shield Wall again. Shield of Light, your perceived threat is 15% more. You're better at insulting your enemies or attacking you instead of your friends. We'll just put it that way. +3 targets to shield taunt. Negative 3% reduction in incoming damage on protection by the shield. That's, again, the new buff, right? Gives you a buff to that. Disorient, 20% chance your shield skills reduce your target's critical rating by 5%. That was the thing I was talking about before. Remember I was saying it had that little chance to do? This is where it comes from. Makes them not as good as when they get crit, they have a higher chance of reducing things. High Spirited, you get more healing, which is good if you're a tank. So I just don't have that on right now because I want to show you things. Improved shield spikes. Increases the duration of crit chance of shield spikes. Shield spikes are good to have. 10% shield crit chance as well as their duration. Much longer. There's something you can buy from Guardian trainers. It's probably good to just have it. It's a little extra bonus, right? But you could just not use shield spikes and just don't put points into this. That's up to you. We have Stoic. Your warrior's heart skill has a chance to apply a damage bubble on use. Well, if you put all 6 points in this, it's a 100% chance. That's where that comes from, the bubble on heart. And then warrior's fortitude increases the excuse me. Words. I'm having words trying to talk as fast as I can and clearly. I'm getting tongue-tied, excuse me. Increases the physical mitigation. Increases incoming healing and block and parry block rating. That's from your warriors, those warriors fortitude. And that is from, again, that's when you're doing stuff, you get a stack over time. It's what I'm thinking that's from. So we'll talk about that later. This is where you get judgment. It's the end. You obviously have to put enough points in to get to the end. And break ranks. Shield taunt will cash out maximum stacks of fortification for a 30% group damage buff for 15 seconds. Wow. So you would make your whole group do way more damage. That's crazy. Ranks cannot trigger more than once each 60 seconds. Gain a passive 5% damage. Wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right, Lithuania defense. Fortification effects on the Guardian. In order to, again, the fortification thing is, let me show you where it is. Yeah, fortification stacks are something that stacks on you as you're using certain abilities. As you do things. I was trying to find exactly which skill, but there's several skills that stack it. And then, of course, there's ones like Lithuania defense that will cash them out. They're greatly increased threat, and they can get better and better, right? So you can cash them out at a certain amount. So anyway, let's keep going. It'll probably be in this other tree too. So that is pretty much the blue tree. So now what we're going to do is, at this point, we're going to hop to the yellow tree, which is the secondary tree, which will then let us just end with the red tree, okay? Because the yellow tree is also going to be used for the red one. So this first one gives you force opening, allows you to do a skill, the ability. We already talked about that. Insult to injury. Damaging enemies causes a chance to renew all debuffs on your targets. Cool. Different things you put on them, okay? Bolster of light. All right, this is where we get that ability. 5% chance to spread debuffs on targets up to 3 targets within 10 meters by Bastion of Light. Excuse me. Yeah, it's cool. It's the one we already talked about. It's this thing. It has a chance to remove your debuffs around if you have lots of ads or NPCs you're fighting, okay? Radiant. There's what I'm looking for. Increases the range of it. Your damaging skills have a 10% to apply debuffs on your targets, and then it goes up for that. It increases the radius, the more points you put into it. If you put all 3 points, it gets much higher. All right, Flash of Light. Bastion of Light now deals light damage over time to those in the hot spot. Okay, so people that are in the spot you roar and leave on the ground, you take light damage, the enemies, which is kind of cool. Kind of cool. Guardians have like this, like the hope ability now, almost like, you know, a little bit like on a magical, not magical, but like, you know, for the free peoples. I think that's kind of cool. This one gives you block and parry. Great. This one, Warriors, gives you tactical mitigation and some other bonuses. Tenderize. Using parry and block chain attacks increase your critical rating. This effect may stack up to 5 times and will expire out of combat. Okay. I'm trying to think if that also counts as part of the other thing I was talking about with the fortification, but I don't think so. I think this is a separate one. But this is really cool because you get more and more critical rating and you just kind of stack them up. We also have this one. Focus. Scoring a critical hit with a single target. Response skill will increase the target's, decrease their mitigations. So they take more damage. Put it that way. Make it easy for you guys. Light touched. This, you are able to block with two-handed weapons. This is the cool one, guys. This is the one that's so, so cool. So now with that, you can use a... There's really no point to use this in when you're traded in Defender of the Free, mind you, because if you're using a shield, unless you're deciding to... I don't know why you'd be traded in Defender of the Free using a two-handed weapon. So don't do this, what I did here and put these points. I threw these in really quick to make the video. Don't use this one if you're in the blue tree. Use that in the red tree, okay? So be in the red tree to use it. So we'll go over here. So 2.5% increased melee damage, incoming modifiers. You may now block with two-handed weapon. So again, if we look here, and I take out my two-handed weapon, and look at the block, and look, it's not NA with a two-handed weapon. It says I can block. That's pretty cool, right? Now, granted, a shield usually gives more block chance on it, like the stats on the shield, so... But still, it's just cool you can have more block. It's really cool. Numbed senses. Ignore the pain will remove an additional 3 things, right? Which is the poison removal instead of just 1. That's always good to have full points in, I feel. Especially if you're tanking a big thing. Bolster. Blocking attack will increase your critical rating. This effect may stack up to 5 times. Each rank increases your critical defense bonus and bolster stacks, increasing mitigations and defenses. So this is good to have bolster, really, if you could have it as a two-hander. Realistically, it's probably good to have this with the blue line, okay? If you're using the blue line. That might also count as the fortification stacks, unless I can find the other thing. I don't know why I can't find that one. Redirect, that's where this skill comes from. Disabling strike, the potency of your non-damaging debuffs is increased. Yeah, they're all right there. it gives some bonuses to your thing right there. Negative run speed, their faster attack, damage reduction, the potency of your non-damaging debuffs is increased. So all the ones that debuff, those are all the things that it increases all your debuffs in that way. So that's good. Vicious Rebuttal? Yeah, that's the word. Okay. Redirect skill will absorb the reflect damage. So if I put more points in this, it wouldn't just be 10% with that redirect. It would be 25%, which is kind of crazy good, okay? That really, right there, having a 25% damage absorb and reflect from redirect is insane. I highly recommend putting all the points in that, whether you're red or tank tree, whichever one. Keen Knife or the Defender of the Free, okay? That's amazing. This is where you get Thrill of Danger. This one is Bring on the Pain. For a short period of time, your Thrill of Danger skill will allow you to restore a small bit of your maximum morale every time you are hit. Excuse me, I said before hit. I take that back from what I said a half hour ago. Sorry about that. Little miscommunication there in my own brain when I read that. But, so whenever you're hit, you get some max morale back. 2.5% at 5 ranks. Highly recommend that if you're doing the tank tree. That's for sure. This one, the Anthem here, increases the range and number of targets affected by your War Chant skill. War Chant will also reduce the cooldown of your parry and block skills, which we already talked about. So that's cool. That's where that comes from. This one, Strong Bursts, increase your area of effect skill damage by 20%. So now we have an ability that increases by 20% and crit damage 20%. This flat increases by 20%. Dude, Guardians are going to be really good at dishing out some single target damage and some AoE killing mobs. Dude, they're going to have so much more damage. It's so crazy good. Protected by the Light. Enhance your skill's protection by the shield and protects by the sword. So adds damage, shield to protection by the sword. So that's this one right here that we already talked about. That's the reflection damage it's talking about, where you can do some damage back at the enemy when your friends are hit or you. From that visibility, that's what they're talking about. And this is where you get Cataclysmic Shout, which of course is so cool and looks like this. So anyway, that's the yellow tree, okay? Again, all the yellow tree, no matter which one you're in, will only cost 1 point to put each thing in because it's a backup secondary tree to the other two now. But I like that they still call it the Fighter of the Shadow. Still cool. All right, let's finish this up with looking at the Keen Blade, all right? Keen Blade, starting with this one, Thrill of Battle. Increases your chance to score critical hits when using combat skills. Your successful damage melee attacks increase your critical chance by 5% and stacks up to 5 times. Scoring a critical hit will refresh it. So you can get up to 25% chance to crit, and then when you crit, when it's at 5 stacks, it'll go away, but then it'll keep stacking again. That's so good. That's another massive damage buff. Then we have heavy weapons training, plus 5% just flat damage, plus another 5% if you have a two-hander. So that's 10%, because 5 for skills damage. And yeah, wow. Okay, wow. This is where you get thrust, which we talked about already. Thrust, you can put points in the thrust, deeper wounds, +3 increase deep wounds and terrible wound. Bleed pulses, how long it lasts and bleeds them. That's what that means. Little translation there. 15% damage of deep wound and terrible wound increases the damage. Okay. Broad strokes, 100% chance for sweeping cut to cause bleed to your target, plus 2 targets you can hit with it. Cool. Better at killing it. That's the same as it used to be, I believe. But if you're a new player learning, that's what it does. Brutal assault. That's where you get the ability. This one, 50% chance that your parry skill responses reset the cooldown of Brutal Assault, Tireless Blows. So that's pretty cool. So if you get a parry response, you can reset it. All right, so like this. And then it's not going to do it every time, but it's every 50% chance. Oh, it did it right there. Did you see it? They refreshed it. So that's where that's coming from. And then we have this. Hemorrhage. 100% chance Brutal Assault will cause a bleed if you have all the points in it, plus 15% bleed damage. I believe that's across the board. I don't think that's just for hemorrhage. I think 50% increase for your thrust bleed and your sweeping cuts bleed too. I believe that's. I'm pretty sure. Into the fray. After using your charge, your next melee attack has a 100% chance to crit. You also get 10% increased movement speed for 6 seconds. It buffs your charge, basically, which we already talked about what Brutal Charge does. This one, response, restores power when using parry or block response skills. Critical hits with parry response skills will restore 4% of your max power. Helps you not run out of power. Pretty cool. You have to pick that to go in, and then To the King. That's where To the King comes from. You can also then get Blind Rage. 5 stacks, 100% chance To the King will increase your melee damage by 10% for 20 seconds, and your attack speed by 20%. That's so strong. There's so much damage buffs now. That's a 20, 10, 10, 20, 20. It's like an 85, and then there's some other thing. There's almost like 100% weight 100% to increase your physical damage as a Guardian now. That's crazy if you stack them all and use them on the right timings. Warrior's Advantage enhances your physical mastery, melee, critical, parry. Just gives you some bonuses. And believe these always stack with your guy. And then Hammer Down. This is where Hammer Down comes from. And then, of course, if you get this one, a successful strike with Hammer Down will remove all active bleeds, dealing bonus damage for each bleed that is removed. So it absorbs them and does way more damage all at once. Additionally, for each bleed that is removed, increases the incoming damage on the target by 2.5% for 5 seconds. So that means if you remove 3 or 4 bleeds, you can remove up to 3 bleeds. 2, 5, that's like 7. That's like almost another 10% increased damage. Applies the bleed rep. Oh my gosh. So anyway, that's it. Guardians are pretty awesome now, you guys. That's all I'm going to say. I'm stoked. I'm happy. Overall, complete upgrades for us. They didn't remove any skills that I was disappointed. They replaced a few things. They pretty much just gave us more stuff, and upgraded a few skills that were kind of useless. They made them actually relevantly good for not only for doing raids and fellowship stuff, and doing it for damage and for tank stuff. So super excited. We managed to complete this before an hour. And I appreciate you if you watched the entire thing. I really, really do. Oh, excuse me, with a little bit of a... How did you like that cheesy grin for like 2 seconds? My OBS is being weird with the recording. So anyway, guys, have a great day. Thank you to my wonderful Patreons for their support. It really means a lot. Couldn't do it without you guys. I put a lot of time. I did a lot of studying before I made this video. So this video wasn't just an hour of me talking and telling you. I had an hour and a half before this getting ready for it. So anyway, thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe right there. Next episode's up there. Over there is a LOTRO tale where I do voiceovers in the Lord of the Rings online. Baruch Hazad Kuzadim, and you stay happy. Check out my social medias and stuff. And I'll see you all in the next episode of The Voice of the Rings. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.